Stuart Skinner is done as the starting goalie of the Edmonton Oilers. It might not be today, it might not be tomorrow, but Edmonton can't keep doing this.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Wednesday edition of Locked On Oilers. I am your host, Nick Zararis. This is my 10th season doing digital hockey content, my third as a host here on the Locked On Podcast Network. So I know what it feels like when your favorite team gets their butt kicked, and tonight the Oilers got their butt kicked. Locked On Oilers is a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the number one sports podcast network. And today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com, download the FanDuel app for your chance at $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So, my friends, we are here once again after a disappointing performance, after a flat-out, unacceptable performance on a variety of levels. And we will get to the goaltending. Don't get me wrong. We are going to start today's show talking about the goaltending in the macro, the big picture, and why this game is the straw that broke the camel's back. In our second segment, we will pivot to talking about mentality and approach and why the Oilers continue to find themselves getting boat raced in these games. And then in our final segment, we'll talk about a tipping point, because there's games left. Don't get me wrong. We're still going to play hockey the rest of November, December, January, February, March, and then half of April. But time is of the essence, friends. And let's get on into it. When you make decisions as a stakeholder, someone with authority, someone with control of a situation, you need a certain baseline level of credibility to ensure your power. And it's a little bit different in sports versus public office when mayors, governors, senators, congresspeople, presidents, parliamentarians, whatever system of government you happen to live through, it is different. Those people need the consent of the governed. In sports, it's a little bit different. The fans just stop showing up. That's the worst place to be. The enemy of love is indifference. That's the reality here. If people stop showing up, that means they're done with what you're putting out there. They don't think it's worth their time, it's worth their money. And the Oilers are still drawing very well. Oiler fans are loyal to a fault and will continue to show up as the team struggles. But you need a certain baseline level of credibility to ensure your power. And that's where this conversation really begins. I don't even think this is particularly Skinner's fault as far as his role in the organization's utilization of him. He dramatically overachieved as a rookie. Ken Holland thought he found gold. He won all those games, made the All-Star team. And since then, he has rewarded the Oilers with the most volatile goaltending performance imaginable. And the Oilers are the significant other that only looks for the good in the situation. They're the significant other that only sees the good parts of their partner. They're not thinking about, well, he doesn't have a great job. His health insurance, his deductible is really high. American joke, sorry. He drinks too much. He doesn't spend enough time with me. The house is kind of a mess. He's got too much junk laying around. He doesn't act like an adult. And all the Oilers see when they look at Stuart Skinner is, we have so much fun when we go out. We listen to the same music. We like the same teams. We love the same movies and TV shows. And that's all the Oilers are doing. They are romanticizing a deeply flawed player who is out of his depth. And I do get flack for this a lot in my work. I always am going to be more empathetic towards the player because I can relate more. I can identify more. We all have our struggles. We all have certain aspects of our life that we wish we could do better at. And I'm not going on some grand pontification here. There's no greater reflection on life in today's show. There might be if they keep losing like this, but the Oilers put Skinner in a really rough spot. And he has continued to fail over and over and over again. And you reach a certain point in your credibility where you have to do something or the entire operation falls apart. And this game against the Stars on Tuesday, November 25th, is the point of no return. We have heard rumblings, murmurs, whispers, conversation that Stan Bowman and the Oilers decision makers are going to take the next month or so to decide what they need. And we talked about that a bit on yesterday's show, that generally teams start to put together their deadline shopping list in December. The Oilers are in dire straits. Under the hood, their numbers are paltry. Their goaltending numbers are an atrocity. If you need another month to determine what isn't working about this hockey team, I question if you are watching the games. And there is loyalty here. If you want to believe that Frank Zararis report, I am always a bit skeptical of Frank. He has definitely eschewed some of his credibility the last 2 years, reporting things that ultimately turned out to not be true. Now, whether he got bad sourcing or he made it up, that's a different conversation. But if you continually get reports wrong and your sources are wrong, your credibility as a reporter is dissipated. So I would err a bit of skepticism in that. But Frank Zararis reported the Oilers were going to replace Calvin Pickard as the backup, and whether that's calling up Connor Ingram, though I don't think that would be the case, or facilitating a trade, or something entirely off the radar, the conjecture from Frank is the guys on the team said, no, we want Pickard as the backup. And that's a little too Rudy for me. I don't think the guys are throwing their credibility or their season down on the line for the backup goalie with the .850 save percentage, which I'm sure went down after the game tonight because he gave up quite a few goals in relief of Skinner. But make no mistake about it, the Oilers have no credibility as a hockey team as long as they continue to send Skinner and Pickard out there. And this sucks. There's no other way to say it. You want to see the guys on your team succeed. Stuart Skinner, the guy, is a really good story. A in-house developmental piece from the area, good local kid makes good, incredible rookie season out of nowhere, saves their bacon, does a great job in 2 conference finals, outplays Jake Ottinger, who very well could be one of the 3 goalies America sends to the Olympics in February. And we are at a point now where the rest of the team is not good enough to wait for Skinner to figure it out. And we talked about that a ton this summer on Locked On Oilers. If you were there in the dog days of July and August, you have a certain responsibility to the guys on this team. You have a certain expectation of where you're at. And it's reasonable to say the Oilers need more from certain guys, from Ekholm, from Bouchard, from McDavid, from Draisaitl, from Podkolzin, from everybody. But we have to be realistic in our expectations here. Stuart Skinner has never been an above-average NHL goalie, and I understand the Oilers aren't asking him to be above average. They're asking him to be slightly below average. But the way the team around him is playing, even if the Oilers got above-average goaltending, I don't think it would matter a whole lot. And while I don't think Skinner has any credibility going forward as a starter, I also think the way the team in front of him is playing is not being discussed enough. And it can be both. I do think it's important to note that we can walk and chew gum at the same time here on Locked On Oilers. And speaking of the way those two interact, we're going to take our first break on today's show. When we come back, I'm going to tell you why, even though the goaltending is what sank them, their performance in front of Stuart Skinner is why they were sinking. Let's be honest. Most of us can't even name all our financial accounts, let alone what they're worth. Between 401ks, savings, and investments, it's really easy to lose track, and that can leave meaning money on the table. That's why I started using Monarch, an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or phone. Monarch's helped me organize my accounts, track my spending, and get a better handle on my investments. And most importantly, I have never opened a spreadsheet. I love that I can review everything, set goals, and make better financial decisions. Monarch's visual dashboards and smart tools make it so easy to understand where my money's going and how I can make it work harder for me. Do not let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarch.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarch.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year's subscription. Thank you to everyone who is making Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. Locked On Oilers, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. Real quick, want to shout out Connor Clattenburg picking up his first career NHL goal. I want to apologize for calling him Mark Clattenburg. That is a referee in the English Premier League who I hand up, just the names got them mixed up. It's like Ryan Leonard and Riley Leonard, the Washington Capitals forward and the former Wisconsin, now Colts quarterback. Sometimes you just get names in your brain, wires crossed. Want to apologize. Picking up your first tally in the show. Great moment. One of the few bright spots in this game. Kid had juice. Kid wanted to get a fight going or ratted Faxa. Faxa said no, but credit where it's due. That's a kid who understood the moment and, most importantly, isn't being tainted by the malaise creeping over this team. And some of that I do think stems from the top down. I think the fact that there hasn't been a reactionary move. The fact that Kris Knoblauch is so even keel, so nonchalant, he's never fired up. I do think that reflects this team. I know the attitudes and mentalities of leadership trickle down to the people under them. And that's why we talk about leadership and culture to death in the sports space. There is no salary cap on coaching. There is no salary cap on leadership. Those traits are essential to any successful team. And I have been extremely complimentary of Kris Knoblauch through his 2 years now as coach of the Edmonton Oilers. But this current run of form, and I know they were 3-1 on the road trip. I know their record isn't god-awful, but you got to call a spade a spade. That team got on the ice tonight and was as flat as any game I have seen this group play in a long time. I wrote down in my notes, where is it? Hang on. I got to scroll back here. I got to scroll back. Sorry. This is terrible radio, but handwritten notes have an upside. Okay. Longer passes. Mangiapane misses breakaway. One and done stack. Oilers chasing game harshly down 1-0. Jamie Benn hits a post. Oilers penalty. Big rebound. Roopehin's goal. 2-0. That quick. Mangiapane misses. Stars come back 1-0. Then the Stars get a good shift down in the offensive zone. They wear Edmonton down. Edmonton is chasing the puck like chickens with their head cut off. Nobody is where they need to be. Nobody is making a play to actually win the puck. They are reacting, not preventing. And defense in the NHL is about pressure. You need to make the person holding the puck make a decision. Do I need to move my feet or do I need to move the puck? And tonight, the Oilers were chasing. You know what it looked like in the offensive zone for the Stars? It looked like an older brother running away from their little brother, like a 14-year-old running away from an 8-year-old, where that 14-year-old, they've hit puberty, they've got the longer legs, they can run faster. And the 8-year-old's trying, they're chasing, and they're not getting there. And that's how you fall behind the way they did. And the Stars are missing Mikko Rantanen. The Stars are missing Nils Lundqvist. I know Lundqvist is hurt a lot, but that's a decent NHL player. The Stars got off the bus with a rocket up their butt and said, this team has nothing. Let's bury them. That is a reflection on mentality. And I have spent 6 weeks now talking about the fact the Oilers do not have the individual talent to play the way they've been. the long stretch passes, the defensemen on islands, the forwards trying to carry pucks through traffic, the dump-ins to no one, the blind passes to no one, the pucks to no one. The Oilers went 15 minutes in this game to start the game, 2 shots on goal. It took the Oilers more than 15 minutes to get 2 shots on goal. This is a team that features 2 of the 5 best players in the world, an all-world offensive defenseman, and a litany of other really solid NHL players. And you would have thought they never played organized hockey together before. The Oilers were disjointed, clunky, and Dallas eviscerated them. This game was not close. I know the final score was disgusting. I know the Stars hung a touchdown and a 2-point conversion on the Oilers. It could have been 10. It could have been 14. That's how bad the Oilers were, especially at the start of this game. And we spent the first period dumping on Pickard and Skinner. But 4 goals on 8 shots, that's not an NHL caliber goalie. It just isn't. And you can say whatever you want. It is all interconnected. The defense let Skinner down, Skinner let everyone down, and that starts to drag, and the shoulders start to sulk. The facial expressions start to develop despondency. This team looked dead after 20 minutes. And this isn't like last year, year before. Down 2, this team is hopeless. The Oilers are not capable of scoring 3 straight goals without conceding 1. They simply do not have the capacity to mount multi-goal comebacks anymore. They are not that good. They're just not. They cannot generate dangerous enough offense. They are a team that has no staples, no bread and butter, no fallbacks to get to. And that's why the conversation around the systems and the identity has begun to percolate. I saw Jack Hahn used to work with the Maple Leafs. He does a lot of independent stuff now, consulting, coaching, writing a thread about how the Oilers never seem to have 5 players in the frame in either zone. And I think that's a spacing issue. I think, to Jack's point, I think when your defensemen are so far out of the play in the offensive zone, they're not real outlets. When you have guys not following up on loose pucks, you have guys phoning in checks, it creates a really lackadaisical effort. And I was pissed. I try not to get emotional when it comes to games like this because it's not going to produce anything other than maybe some funny screen grabs for the people watching on YouTube. But the Oilers are better than this. They're not better than the Stars, but they shouldn't be losing games where they look like they've never played organized hockey together before. And the Oilers right now do not have anything going for them. They don't have their stars bailing them out. The depth isn't good enough to make up for the fact the Stars aren't bailing them out. The goaltending is abysmal. And those are all compounding into each other simultaneously. You can point at the coach, you can point at the goaltending, you can point at the defensemen, the forwards. Everybody is culpable in this mess right now. And as we've talked about a lot, it's a lot easier to just change one guy than it is to change the whole team, especially when you consider the fact a lot of the guys the Oilers have are no-trade guys or people who don't have a lot of value in a trade to begin with. So you don't have a lot of recourse for fixing this problem. On that note, we are going to take our second and final break on today's show, and we are going to talk about a segment that I have titled Fecal Matter Sandwich, because we can't swear. I'm going to tell you exactly what that means right after this. The NBA is back, and there is no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game, or if you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to huge fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. We've got some lines posted for tomorrow. We got the Knicks and the Hornets. Got OKC and Minnesota, Western Conference Finals matchup from a couple of years ago. Memphis and New Orleans, a real good poop festa. And then Golden State, Houston used to mean something to me. Those Chris Paul, Westbrook, Harden teams against the immovable object. That was the Steph Warriors. But FanDuel wants to help you make every game more exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets on your first $5 bet wins. Head on over to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you to everyone that is making Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. And look, the only way is through. There is really no other way to say it. When you are up against it, when you are in the suck, when you are down in that hole, you can either lie there and feel sorry for yourself, or you get up and you make something happen. And that's an edict for everybody. It's not just the guys on the ice. It's not just the coaches, the front office, everybody. Are you okay with what just happened? You're not. But this is a nonchalant team. This is a we'll be okay team. You saw this down the stretch of the regular season last year, where I kept coming on the show episode after episode and saying, if they play like this for the next week, next month, when they get to the playoffs, they're going to have no rhythm. They're going to have no flow. And I wrote something along the lines of, Oilers easily demoralized. When a situation is tenuous, it's really easy to fall apart. I'm going to give you an example. As you get older, post-college, late 20s, 30s, you start to realize how difficult it is to make plans. And they start to have preconditions, and they start to have expectations. And the most textbook example, of course, everyone is familiar with, you get invited to an occasion, and your first instinct is to ask, well, is this person going? And if they're not going, your willingness to go massively drops off. And that's kind of the circumstance we're dealing with here. The Oilers are that fragile house party, that fragile get-together that is tricky to put together now. And guys have gotten older. There are new faces popping up. There are significant others. And when those plans are tenuous, it requires a lot of nurturing. It requires a lot of effort to corral everybody to get where they need to go. And it's really easy for everybody to go back to being themselves, and everybody's out in their own little circles. And it's all downstream of each other, which is a complicated concept that doesn't lend itself too well to sports. In the world of sports, the way media works, you read a column, you listen to a podcast, you watch an Instagram reel, a TikTok video, a YouTube short, a full-length YouTube video essay, you read tweets. We want what happened, who did it, and we want as crisp and direct language as possible. Who do I blame for the reason I am unhappy? It is really easy to just say the goalie, the coach, player X, player Y. Everybody is culpable in this problem. Hockey is a weak link sport. The worst player is going to stand out against the other team's best. And when you have that weak link, your goal is to minimize it as much as possible. It's really hard to minimize a weak link. That's a goalie. A goalie has such an influence on the outcome of a game. A goalie who doesn't even get tested a whole lot struggles. Let's say, just little envelope math here for you. The Oilers conceded 8 shots on goal against. Stu gave up 4 goals. 900 save percentage. So let's say 90 times 8 times 0.9. So that would still be a goal against, don't get me wrong, but that would only be one. That'd be a 8 times 9, 0.72. You would get 7.2 out of 8. Now, you round down 7 out of 8. That's still one goal against, but down 1-0 after one period, that would work. Down 1-0, you still have a little energy. You still have a little momentum. And there will be people who point out the Ekholm mistakes and the Bouchard mistakes, and that's valid. The plays breaking down are why the goal ultimately happens. But sometimes your goalie needs to help. And it's funny. In the hockey world, if your goalie is too good, your team gets labeled as not being good. They're goalie merchants. They're too reliant on Hellebuck or Shesterkin or Sorokin. And if they're too bad, well, you can't ask him to do that. He's terrible. The team in front of him needs to play. But it's a real irony. And I wish I had a better answer for you as to how we talk about this more constructively. But environment produces the conditions, and how the players interact with those conditions is largely a product of their individual talent, how their talents intersect and the game itself unplays. That's why we play the games, and that's why it's compelling. But when you watch the Oilers, I mean, what are they doing well? If you are a fan of this team and you are watching this slop night after night, what would you say the Oilers do well? They dump the puck in great. They don't ever go get it. They're good for one dangerous offensive zone rush that doesn't result in a goal. They generate a ton of point shots. Don't get me wrong. They generate maybe the most point shots of any team in the entire NHL, but they are not producing any type of discernible offense. Their defense, because it has an increased magnification on it, is wilting in these close situations. And then, because the goalies aren't good, it all flows in both directions. Not only are they not scoring enough, so the defense has more responsibility, so the goaltending needs to be perfect. The goaltending is bad, which means the defense needs to be better, which means the offense needs to be better, which means everything is bad. And, you know, not to be Limp Bizkit, but everything sucks. Yeah, kind of. Everything sucks about this team right now. The vibes are god-awful. At 2-0, 5 minutes in, I knew this game was over. There was not a chance the Oilers were coming back to win this game, and you still had to sit there for another 50-ish minutes and 2 periods. And poor Jack Michaels lost his voice on the Connor Kleinberg goal. It's really one of those nights where everything that could go wrong did go wrong, and at the same time, I kind of feel lucky the Stars didn't score 10 or 15. The Oilers have a lot of soul searching to do. They have a lot of digging to do. Stan Bowman needs to get working that phone, and we'll talk about it more on tomorrow's show ahead of Thanksgiving. The goalie market is bad. There are no great goalies out there, and you have no idea how any of them are going to fit if you bring one in. And everyone knows you need to bring one in, so they're going to drive an even harder bargain. But that will do it for today's edition of Locked On Oilers. Thank you so much to everyone that made Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. Locked On Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. Be sure to check out Locked On NHL Game Night, where the guys are breaking down every game every night until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned in June. You can find it wherever you get your podcasts or over on YouTube. I will talk to you guys tomorrow on American Thanksgiving. See you guys then. Until then, let's go Oilers.